Hello, hello, hello. Let me get everything. There we are. How are you today? So we got a Sunday stream. I was gonna do a stream tomorrow and then things came up. So no stream tomorrow and no stream on Thursday because Thanksgiving. Um yeah, it looks like I'll be able to sort out a regular streaming schedule again sometime soon. In the next couple weeks or so be on the lookout for that. I will post on the social medias and down below or up wherever the info tab is, wherever you're watching, there it will be posted there. Yeah, so we've got a couple inks today. They're 2 red Diamine inks. It is actually the very last 2 samples of all my sample boxes. So I've been at ink reviews for a year and a half now, and saving incursions by new inks as I buy them, because I've reviewed inks as I've gotten them. We're finally through all the samples, which means next week I am going to be breaking into my actual bottles of ink. And you'll probably see a very radical difference between the samples and the bottles, because if it's a bottle, if I own a bottle of it, that means I like it enough that I want a bottle of it. And samples, you might see a overrepresentation of certain colors in samples, because I bought a lot of samples trying to figure out which one of this colorway that I want. You will see usually one representative of each kind in there. Anyway. The first one, I grabbed the wrong book. Got my 2 colorings, and I grabbed the wrong one. And I always forget that I got open the webcam configuration, because it just hates autofocus. It just hates autofocusing. Anyway, so the first one, done Diamine Classic Reds. Where is it? Not Poppy. Okay. We've actually got 2 red. These are our 2 reds we're doing today. We're doing Wild Strawberry and Poppy Red. You can see they're very close. There was a period when I was looking for the ideal red for me. This was in that bunch. I settled on Schaefer Red. That's the greatest red. But for now, first one we're going to do is Diamine Wild Strawberry. You can sort of see it as I move around the swab. This one has a really great gold sheen to it. When I first bought these, I didn't understand what sheen was. So I might have seen that and been ugh, but now I know what sheen is. So yeah, so we're going to see how it looks on paper. It has been probably at least 4 years since I've used this sample. I did use it at some point because I never rejected it for my red trials, but I haven't used it since. It has been sitting in the box. It actually that sample predates before I figured out boxes, and was just in a baggie. Like I said, had this particular ink vial, both of these actually, for at least 4 years, and haven't touched them in that time. So let's go. I just dropped my notebook in spectacular, infomercial style. Okay. And then later today I will also be doing scans. At least I'm pretty sure, depending on how long these take. I have nothing else to do. Like I said, I have a thing tomorrow, but it's just a thing where I show up for. I don't have to do any prep. And it's quite lovely. I literally have nothing to do, and I can do whatever I want to do. Okay. Okie dokie. Let me also check the focus again. Need to remember to do this more often because I always forget about it. Okay. The reason I said in my social media posts and everything that, oh, we're talking turkey is because of Thanksgiving. I am copying an article in the paper today about Georgia's wild turkey hunting regulations. Just got to scroll back past a big old picture of a turkey. It's very pretty. Where's the author? Did they just not put an author on this? Did they forget the byline? Oh, that's funny. This went down a little darker at first. I don't know if that's because I failed to clean totally the blue from last time out. But yeah, it's I don't know, on this paper it's seeming less orangey than I remember. I don't know. I'm trying to remember why I rejected this. Maybe I didn't, because I remember there were a couple I outright rejected because they're basically pink, but there were also a couple that I was like, oh, okay. They're fine, but I like this one better. I think this one might have been one of those, these two might have been ones that were good reds, but I like Schaefer Red more. I'm trying to remember back 4 or 5 years ago, minute thoughts I had about inks. Oh no, what I'm doing, first of all, welcome. What I'm doing is I review fountain pen inks, so the whole point is doing it in ink. So I'm basically writing with the pen, several pens to review the ink. And what I'm doing is I'm transcribing a newspaper article to help me get a feel of what the ink is like in writing. Because I personally think it's more useful to see long form. Oh, let me do that again. It's got a great snap. But to see long form writing samples of inks if I want to buy it or not. Mm. Some people use inks for drawing. I don't. I mainly use them for writing. I got into fountain pens and inks when I was in school, but I graduated grad school a couple years ago, and since then I haven't used my inks and pens as much. That's the other reason I'm doing these reviews, is because all my stuff was sitting around gathering dust because I was no longer in school. I'm not writing as much as I was when I was in school. So this is a way to use the stuff I really like using and writing with. But yes, I am reviewing these for writing purposes and writing in specific types of pens. I am not a writer. Um, it's ironic. It's like, oh, hey, look, I'm very into pens and fountain pens and writing and like the actual act of writing, but I don't actually do that much writing as a profession. It's really contradictory and weird. But hey. Who says all hobbies need to make sense? Actually, a lot of people that are into fountain pens, a lot of them are writers and artists, but a fair number of them are actually software engineers. It's kind of weird. But yeah. Oh, this is a really pretty red. It doesn't always come through on the webcam because the webcam doesn't necessarily appreciate, like, the colors don't translate all the time. But this is a really pretty red, and now I'm like, why did I decide to like the other red over this one? I don't know. Yeah, essentially, I am just copying with ink. It seems a little trivial. What it also does for me is, like I said, I'm copying newspaper articles, so I subscribe to my local paper. And there was a while there when I was subscribed because I'm like, I want to support local journalism, but then I would never read it. I would always forget about it. So transcribing these newspaper articles is a way to get me to look through the local paper that I subscribe to. I pay money for this and actually read it. The whole purpose behind this whole ink review enterprise is to get me to use stuff that I haven't paid for and have paid for that otherwise just sit there unused. And what I'm doing now, I'm drawing these lines because, like I said, these are eventually going to be scanned and posted as as reviews of the ink. And I don't. This is so I write an even number of lines with each pen because it's a couple different pens that I'm using to show off what the ink looks like in each one. I do not do. I have dabbled a little bit in calligraphy. It is not really my thing. There are a lot of calligraphers out there, though, that do gorgeous, gorgeous work. A good friend of mine, actually, if you want to see some really good calligraphy, it's Entropy Ink. Entropy as in, like, the physics concept. Ink on Instagram. That's Nick Pang. He does real good work. Oh wait, I need to write the name of the ink and everything up top so I can know what it is I've written. So what I do for these ink reviews is I have one ink that I've inked up in 3 different pens that have different levels of ink flow. This has the least ink flow, so it's dry. This is the middle amount, so I call it regular, and this one has a really high ink flow rate, so it's a wet pen to see what it looks like. An ink looks like with all the different flow rates. Then I do it on a couple different papers to show what it looks like on a couple different papers. This one, the Kikuyo Campus, is my personal favorite. It's got a lot of really good line rulings that I like. This one it's 6mm, except for this top line, which is randomly wider, and it's lined, but there's dots every 5mm on the line, so it allows you got lines for writing, but then you can space everything really nicely and evenly, and it's my favorite. I also really like the paper. It's not too glossy, but it's also not super toothy, and it's coated such that to show off a bunch of ink properties. 'Cause that's the problem with using fountain pens nowadays, at least in America. That a lot of our, what am I doing? Writing the wrong thing. A lot of our paper is super absorbent, and the water-based fountain pen ink just obliterates the paper. So pretty much all the paper I use is either Japanese, or I do have one French paper that I use. I do have one American paper. I use Staples generic paper to show what it looks like on terrible paper. Rick. Yes, this is a Parker 45. It's a later model because the cap isn't metal. Actually, I have a couple Parker 45s. I really like them. And it has a semi-hooded nib that is easily swappable between models, and it is a cartridge converter, not a vacuum or a plunger or piston or anything. And I've got a steel nib on this one, but I have others that have gold nibs on them. Oh, yes. What is that? Parker. Did you use Parker Jotters? Parker Jotters are great pens. I'm a fountain pen person, clearly, so I don't really own much in the way of Parker Jotters. I actually do have one, though, that I got a professor when I was in grad school, retired, and left a bunch of his stuff in the break room. That was a free-for-all. There was a very fancy, like, botanical pattern Parker Jotter in there that just needed a new spring and a new refill. It was good as new. It's lovely. What color of jotter, or at least you can, if it wasn't a jotter, because I know they make other pens. That's just like I said. If you're talking fountain pens, I would be able to nail down exactly which make and model it is. I'm not as familiar with the ballpoints and rollerballs. I think like because jotters roughly do similarly look like this, except they actually have like a little tip down here and a clicky. Does. And if I do not answer your questions right away, it is because I am copying down a newspaper article. Parker makes good pens. They do good things. Yep, they have the distinctive arrow clip, which, yeah, makes them easily recognizable. Also makes it really easy to recognize knockoffs. So there's a couple Chinese companies right now that are getting big that somehow, I guess the patents expired or became public domain for a lot of the older Parker models. And the Chinese companies just took them and like have been producing exact copies, even down to the arrow nib, where it's like, oh, you could, if you had done a different, or an arrow nib, arrow clip, where it's like, even if you had done same body style but changed the clip, you would be like, oh, inspired by XYZ Parker. But no, we're just gonna like full on lift this like very trademarkable thing. I don't know. I mean, I can't be totally mad because the pens that they are copying have been long since discontinued. So it's not actually like they're competing for market share or anything with knockoffs. They're making it so you can buy approximately a new Parker for the first time in 20, 30 years of that model pen. But it's still like, really? You're going to copy down to the trademark clip? Hi, Rowell. What is... Sorry, windows popped up over on top of each other. I am copying an article on turkey hunting in Georgia today because Thanksgiving is on Thursday. So how could I not copy the article about turkey hunting? And one of the things I have learned is that turkey hunting Thanksgiving is out of season for turkey hunting. You can only hunt turkeys in Georgia in the spring. It's deeply ironic. Not quite sure why that is. So there is no fresh wild turkey at Thanksgiving in Georgia. It is only frozen wild turkey, because you have to hunt it in the spring or poach it illegally. The article doesn't mention anything about pheasants. Doves, quail, duck, and geese are in season, but they have bag limits. Crow is unlimited. You can shoot unlimited crows. I've never actually had pheasant. I would definitely desire to try pheasant at some point. Have not had it. What I don't quite understand is why we don't have venison as an alternative Thanksgiving meat. Because that makes sense based on the slightly fabricated historical narrative. And deer are delicious. Also have population issues because we've gotten rid of all their predators. So putting them on the Thanksgiving table would help with population control. So the most I have venison is we have it every year at New Year's. We do meat fondue, and venison is spectacular because you're essentially deep frying it in a little pot on the table. So good that way. Also, it's been like at least 4 years since I've used Diamine Wild Strawberry, and I forgot how good it is as an ink. Whoops. Like, that is spectacular. Okay, here's the rodeo. So Wicked Mouse, I mentioned that I was using Japanese and French papers. So this one's Japanese, the Kikuyo, and the first one was Tomoe River. That is also Japanese. This is the French one. This is the standard, this is kind of the fountain pen world standard paper because it's easy to get a hold of and very, very, very consistent. I do not know if they're still watching. Yeah, I really forgot how good this one is. It's definitely on the orange end. Yay! Sorry, wasn't sure. I saw the viewer count do weird things. And I know Twitch sometimes will randomly freeze for people and restart, so I wasn't sure. Cool. I do not use brushes. Well, I use paint brushes to make the swabs. I am a very boring pen person. I don't do anything fancy with my pens. I just write with them. But there are definitely people that use brushes and all sorts of like funky italics. But yeah, like I said, I basically just write with them and I don't write anything fancy. I'm not a writer. I just, take notes, write my planner, etc. I did basically write the first draft of my dissertation proposal by hand. But that's because I get distracted easily when I'm on a computer. It's a lot easier for me to create writing things, but I have to draft things to do that first draft on paper. It's so much easier for me. It just flows much better. And then I don't do my editing on the computer and everything. But even like correcting and stuff, like I will print out copies and mark it up manually. Like, the most I have done with pretty letters is improve my handwriting. This is miles better than it was just a couple years ago, because when I was in grad school I would TA and I would have to grade papers, and so I would do that by hand because that's how I roll, and then my students would be, I can't read what you wrote, which told me, one, they were actually reading my comments, but two, okay, I needed to work on my handwriting because I refused to do it by giving comments, like comments in Microsoft Word or something. Flip. Okay, so this next notebook is a 1 cent, literally 1 cent Staples notebook that was gotten in a back to school sale. So the paper quality is crap. The whole point of this is to see what inks can actually do well on shitty paper that is common in the US. And most of them do very poorly. Occasionally you get surprises though. So this is pretty close to actual toilet paper consistency. So crap paper is, when I say crap paper, I mean it's bad for fountain pens. This is actually really nice to use with pencil. And so bad with fountain pens means the ink feathers a lot. It bleeds through the page a lot. Just to show you an example. So like, look at all the bleeding. It's just not great. Yeah. And like I said, there's lots of feathering, the letters look real fuzzy, the ink will spread a lot and just make what you thought was really fine tip size really broad, and it just makes it... The ink does not look its best on this paper for the most part. Once in a while there will be an ink that looks better on the crap paper than it does on the like good paper. Where was I in the article? Is in their feet. Yeah, usually very thin, but also it's very absorbent, because there's very thin papers like that Tomoe River, that first notebook that I was using, has very, very thin paper, but it's treated in such a way that makes it so that there isn't any bleed through and there isn't any feathering. The letters are very crisp, look very good, and it doesn't, like I said, doesn't bleed through to the other side, you don't get spreading, etc. This one is just, like I said, it's thin and it doesn't, and it's not treated specially, so it's just like burned, like the ink's just like, hello, I will go through all the paper now. Yes, chemistry is fun. The other thing that's the difference between what I define as bad paper versus good for fountain pens paper is that fountain pen ink, when you write with it, will often have other properties besides just the color. There's a thing called shading, where within a letter, ink will pool up in different parts of the letter on like on the nicer papers and actually create almost a gradient of, in this ink it would be, there's a darker red and lighter red portion within a letter, and that effect is really cool looking. But if you have a highly absorbent paper, the ink gets absorbed into the paper before it can do that. There's also a thing called sheen, which this is actually a good example ink for it because it actually does sheen, where you can see how it's like metallic-y up here. That has to do with probably, I'm not as familiar with this chemistry, refraction of the dye particles when it's in high enough concentrations that it causes some sort of combination of refraction and reflection of light, almost like a prism effect. Again, this is me slightly bullshitting based off of science, I know. That it creates a different color effect to come out as a secondary color. And again, you need a paper that doesn't absorb super quickly in order for this effect to come out. Where's another good one? Dark lilacs. Nope, dark lilacs in the other one. No, okay. I'll get another example eventually. Actually, let me do that now. So the swab I have that shows this sheen effect the best is my Lamy Dark Lilac. You see how it's like gold? It's a purple ink. But at the edges where it's really high concentration, it's got that weird double color effect. Yes, so in the more coated or more specially treated papers, instead of just soaking into the paper fibers, it will dry more on top of the paper fibers. It'll still bond with the page, but it bonds in a different way structurally. And that brings out these different effects. Sorry, but I know I just talked a lot and then stopped talking because I'm like, I'm so close to done with this review because this is the last one. This is the last paper I do for each of my reviews is the really crappy paper. So I'm like, oh, let's get this done because the fun part is when you turn it over to see how absorbent and bleed through that it is. Um, Love that snap. I personally am not super adventurous with my inks, which is weird considering I have a science background, so you would think I would be all into it. But yeah, it's very common for people to dilute inks or maybe actually like leave them to evaporate a little bit so they concentrate more or mix inks. Mixing inks is a very common practice. That purple I just showed you was a very limited edition ink from a couple years ago that's no longer available, highly coveted. There's a bunch of recipes for mixing ink out there to make duplicates of that ink. I do purposely tag these videos ASMR because I know there's some ASMR-y aspects to it. I've tried using my mic to pick up the actual sounds. It doesn't work too well, but visual ASMR it can work great for. Yeah, I would love to, I don't know, get a really good mic set up to capture all the scritch, but I would need more room on my desk for that. Oh yes, that is another area of ink I have not mentioned because I'm not working with any of them today. There are sparkle inks, as Rebel said, that literally have like super fine, not quite glitter, it tends to be more precious metal-y. But yeah, so you can get sparkly inks that are slightly classier than your sparkly gel inks. Or at least they look a little classier to me because it's, I don't know. I think it's because the particles are finer. Huh. Holy crap. I had no idea about this. Turkeys apparently have amazing eyesight. They can see you blink from 50 yards away. Apparently, they're also super smart and remember what stuff is fake and what isn't. Jeez. Oh, yeah. Um, I do have, when I was like 12, I was really into quill pens, so I do still have pots and quills, but mainly what I do is, let me just grab one. I have a bunch of bottles of ink. So, like, this is a bottle of ink. Most of the really cool more indie brand inks are in bottles because the technology to package cartridges is more expensive. It's like getting a keg of beer versus a can of beer. Yeah, I'm not a dip pen person. Oh, I'm glad you can still hear the scritching on stream. Like I said, I've tried it and then I've listened back and haven't been able to hear anything. So I'm glad that you're able to hear the scritching. Cool. Yeah. And I'll even show you, I was going to say, oh wait, I got to turn this over and see. I'll show you how I'm going to have to empty these pens to do the second ink, because that's the thing, is I'm going to have to empty, but I'll show you how I empty them and everything. But yeah, I mainly use bottles of ink. I don't really use cartridges. Where did the pencil go? There's the pencil. So this is better performance than normal. Like especially I'm looking at this one. Normally the bleed through is more intense. This one isn't as bad. Dip pens tend to remain the purview of people doing calligraphy. So rinsing them out, it's essentially yes. So like I said, I'll show you after I'm going to have to empty them out anyway, but what am I doing? I did not count correctly. When I first started doing this, I did very specific math. So that way I could maximize amount of stuff. On the page. Okay, so let me show you what I mean when I say I'm emptying out the pen. Getting stuff out of the way. Do not put India ink in a fountain pen. That stuff is made for dip pens and will clog up all the internal mechanisms of a fountain pen. When I say clog up, it's a good thing I have a demonstrator. You see this like black part that has all the fins and everything? Let me see if I can up the focus. Manually messing with focus is fun. But you see how there's like this black part here that's underneath the nib? That's called the feed, and that can get those India inks really gunk up very easily. Like they dry quickly. They're a different solvent base. And so they will basically just clog this whole ink delivery mechanism from the reservoir to the nib. That's why I use them with dip pens. This is why if you want to get a fountain pen, use specific fountain pen inks. Okay, cool. Wasn't sure. I have seen people that I have told, here's the ink to go buy, like given them the instructions, and they go to a craft store and buy India ink and put it in the pen. So I'm very cautious about this. But yeah. So like this is a piston filler, so I just unscrew the knob. So like I'm screwing this knob back here, and the ink is coming out. And so what I'll need to do is basically like rinse this out so I don't have any of the remaining color in there. Because while you can mix inks, sometimes inks react poorly with each other. So unless you do the experiment outside of an actual pen, you want to avoid any nasty, unintentional chemical experiments. So yeah, this also has a piston knob for a converter here. Yeah, I'm basically just putting the leftovers in here. And then I'm gonna, go rinse it all out to make sure everything's good with the next color. And it looks like blood, because it's a red ink. So yeah, so what's gonna happen now is I'm not gonna rinse these out at my desk. Obviously, it's a bad idea to have a bunch of water around a bunch of electronics, so I'm gonna put up the BRB card, and I'll be back in like 10-15 minutes after I, rinse these all out in the bathroom sink. Hello, 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 I'm back. I both cleaned up pens and filled them with the new ink. A lot of the inks in this sample vial set have been really low, so I've needed to like do some creative syringing. And that's just, I like can't do that on stream. Like I like need more space than what is afforded to me. Ta-da. Cool. So the next one that we're doing is right next door. Diamine Poppy Red. It's very similar. I would say it's a little less orange and a little more pinky than Wild Strawberry and doesn't have the sheen, but still the same neighborhood. There was a point, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago when I was sampling a bunch of different reds, and these were both in that sample. So let's get all the stuff. Okay. Yeah, this looks way more red on the cream paper, weirdly enough. Yes. Okay. And if you're wondering why I'm putting this like piece of paper underneath my hand, it's because I have like really aggressive hand oils that will cause weird things to happen on a piece of like on these like better, more precisely manufactured papers. It'll cause weird things. So this is basically a buffer between my hand to prevent my oils from destroying the good paper. That one aligned too early. Counting is hard sometimes. There we are. Yeah, that's the problem with using red inks, is that it looks like you have hurt yourself, or the best is when it's like a purple ink or maroon ink, so it looks like you gave yourself some really nasty bruises. That's always fun. Especially, so my friend Ralph knows who Ralph is. Ralph does this crazy nib experimentation where he'll like make really fat or stacked nibs and lots of welding and everything. And he goes through a lot of ink when he does this. But he also just like gets ink everywhere. At one point he told me that, it's because he like will test inks on his arm. Like instead of like looking for a piece of paper, he'll like just test the nib on his arm. And so he just gets ink like all over his like forearms and everything. He will do this with the worst possible inks. He did it with Bung Box Piano Mahogany, which is a purpley maroon color. It looked like he had just like fucked up his arms or like gotten in a fight, or it looked like really bad bruising and wounds. It was ink. Oh my god. So he has now switched, this was like almost 2 years ago, so he has now switched to only using blue inks, so it's very clear he is not wounded. Instead of like changing his like habits of how he tests things. It's okay, where was I in this article? Okay, there we are. Cool. quality writing right here. The settlers settled. Just realized I need to adjust. I really wish the autofocus didn't bug out for the top-down views, but it does, so I need to manually do it. And I always forget to manually readjust it every single time, because all these are at slightly different heights, so it needs it. Cool. Okay. Yes, he did. So this was, let me first. Such good snapping. So when this happened was at a pen show. So there are trade shows and conventions for everything, including fountain pens. So this was at the Baltimore Pen Show last year. He was demonstrating all his nibs to people as walking around the pen show. And again, instead of just like grabbing a sheet of paper, he would like write on his forearm. And he had a short sleeve shirt on. So all weekend we're in a public place in a hotel with the hotel was not completely taken up by convention goers. There was like other people staying and people would just be like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh no, this is ink." All weekend. Well, not really all weekend. By the time we hit like Saturday afternoon, Sunday, people were like, "Oh," people knew, "Oh, it's just ink." Like word had gone around the convention. But yeah. Like I said, he has now switched to blue. That was the incident that told him, I should do this in an ink that doesn't look like a flesh wound. Exactly. It's just a scratch. So the flip side of everyone being used to the fact that Ralph is now covered in ink all the time, that's just how he is if he was legitimately like had a giant cut on him, or maybe it's like shell or something, the first instinct of most people who know him wouldn't be, oh no, you're hurt. It would be, oh, you're just covered in ink again. Like, that's how it goes. Just ridiculous. He's great, but it's like, sometimes it's like, Ralph, what are you doing? Love him to death, though. This ink is a little bit, well, you can tell, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this. It goes down very like orangey red and it dries pinker. It's a weird experience to sort of see. It's not unusual to have inks go down one shade and then dry another shade. Like, I've had inks that go down, like, especially blue inks that go down, or purple inks that glow, purple especially, that go down slightly red leaning, then dry bluer. It's always unsettling to me when that happens, though. Because I go, oh no, I really like this ink. And then I look up a couple lines later and it's like, it is not as great as I thought it was. Because, I have preferences. I tend to prefer slightly orangier reds. Drop or not. Loss of turkey habitats. I'm just laughing because a couple years ago, a turkey just appeared in the neighborhood. And just like started casually just like wandering about the neighborhood, and just like there was a bunch of woods by where I live in like a little pond lake reservation area. And so we're like, okay, cool. But it decided it liked hanging out on top of people's cars because none of us have garages or indoor parking of any sort, so it would just like chill on top of people's cars. It was hilarious. So that's what I'm thinking, like, oh, turkey habitat. Turkey habitat is on top of cars. That is amazing. There are I might like lift that from you from the chat and be like, hey, because there are multiple artists in the community and several comics artists, be like, someone make this comic. If it hasn't been made already, there's a lot of people, a lot of the community, the fountain pen hobbyist community exists on Instagram. So someone might have made this comic style or like a scenario like that already. And I just haven't seen it because of the algorithm. But yeah, no, that's hilarious. And it is really like that. That is a good question. Why was it censored? Um, yeah. The weird thing is I can see it just fine on my end in the Twitch chat. Oh, yeah, you know what it is? It's because, so this is like widget code and everything, and so the brackets probably messed up whatever program it is that, ports it from Twitch to my streaming software. I was wondering if you were giving me 3 stars for something. And I was like, cool, I don't know. Because I'm like, it's not like it was caught by Automod or something. Also, Redwell's here, and she would have allowed something like, that's the reason I have a mod, is to correct dumb things Automod does sometimes. Also to deal with actual trolls, because it is Twitch. But yeah, it's fine on the Twitch end. It must mess with the importing. Script. Anyway, let's actually read what you wrote, because I just sort of looked at it. That's why I also was like, you could either be giving me 3 stars, it could be an automod thing, or in this case, it was a weird software bug. So the funny thing is that you have no way of knowing about, because you don't know who Ralph is, but he will often make like strings of inaudible noises to express excitement. So Ralph making a bunch of inaudible noises doesn't necessarily mean it's hurt. It could mean he's just really excited about his ink. Spring. Okay. Oh, I knew there were it was conservation reasons why the turkey season is weird. So apparently it is because with the life cycle of the turkey, you need that long period. It's targeted so that way the baby turkeys have enough time to develop the sex differentiating, the sexually dimorphic feather patterns. Because you can only hunt males in Georgia, you can't hunt females because they're a slightly protected species. So you need that sexually dimorphic plumage in order to hunt them properly. And that's just the lead time you need in order for the new crop of chicks to develop that plumage. Well, I say slightly because if they were totally protected, you wouldn't be able to hunt them at all. If they were totally unprotected, there would just be open season on them, and then there's different grades of protection there. It's like depends on the length of the hunting season, size limits, the sexually dimorphic legality, etc. That's pretty common in fisheries as well. So, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the endangered species classification, because you have endangered, you have threatened, you have least concerned, and there's different gradations of threatened. There's, like, highly threatened or slightly threatened and stuff. And so that designation on that conservation scale is going to determine how aggressive your hunting limits are going to be on said species. Or fishing limits if it's aquatic. Oh, I had jumbled science word salad. That happens. Yeah, no. It was supposed to be, yeah. Fair catch. I swear it all makes sense in my head and I think it's coming out of my mouth right, but then sometimes that brain connection don't work too well. Which that makes it easier. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I wrote steel there. I don't. I mean, it is a steel nib, but normally I don't write it on. I only write it on the Rhodia. Ooh, that's a fun name. Barden Warper. I will have that with typing as well, where I'll type a whole thing, it'll be fine, and then like 30 minutes later I go back and read, I'm like, this is missing words and is full of horrible typos. I swear I proofread it. I proofread it before I hit send. But apparently it did not work. Yeah, this is a much more, maybe not much more, but like the wild strawberry is warmer. It has more orange than this. This is more regular red, if you will. You never know. I mean, they could be a Dutch family, and that is a hilarious image. Bard and Warper? Bard's thrower. Scott Bard's thrower. Oh my god, that's great. It's fine. I know quite a bards seem to be left turned into D&D now. Bards seem to be the bane of many a DM's existence. So maybe that'd be a good last name for a DM. Or even just a character in a D&D game where one of the other characters is a bard. That would be hilarious. Okay. So that's about it. I usually do about 2 inks per stream. I've done 3 before, and it kicks my butt in that it's just I've copied too many words and I've been talking for too long. I just turns into incomprehensible word salad. So thank you for joining me. I really enjoyed this. I have, in the past, I've done regular weekly ink review streams. Right now, that's kind of on hiatus. I've got a new job and I'm working out what day is best for me. I will update in that schedule. I'm getting it worked out in the next 2 weeks or so. I should know what my schedule will be, and I'll post that in the info, which is either up here in tabs or down here, depending on what platform you're watching this on, mobile or desktop. But